Today's reading from Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. An English lady desired to have a private talk. She began, "I'm returning to England. I leave this place this evening. I want to have happiness of self-realization in my home. Of course it's not easy in the West, but I shall strive for it. What is the way to do it?" The Maharshi replied, "If realization is something outside you, a way can be shown consistent with the safety of the individual and their capacity. Then the questions if it is realizable, and if so, how long will it take, will also arise. But here, meaning in the ashram with him, realization is of the self. You cannot remain without the self. The self is always realized, but only you do not recognize that fact. The realization is now obscured by the present world idea. The world is now seen outside you, and the idea associated with it obscures your true nature. All that is needed is to overcome this ignorance, and then the self stands revealed. No special effort is necessary to realize the self. All efforts are for eliminating the present obscuration of the truth." And then he gives her an example to illustrate what he's talking about. He says, "A lady is wearing a necklace around her neck, but she forgets it, imagines it to be lost, and impulsively looks for it here, there, and everywhere. Not finding it, she asks her friends if they have found it anywhere, until one kind friend points to her neck and tells her to feel the necklace around her own neck. The seeker does so and feels happy that the necklace is found. Again, when she meets her other friends, they ask her if her lost necklace has been found. She says yes, as if it were lost and later recovered. Her happiness on rediscovering it round her neck is the same as if some lost property had been recovered. In fact, she has never lost it nor recovered it, and yet she was once miserable, and now she is happy." So with the realization of the self is always realized. The realization is now obscured. When the veil is removed, the person feels happy at rediscovering the ever-realized self. The ever-present realization appears to be a new realization. Now, what should one do to overcome the present ignorance? Be eager to have true knowledge. As this eagerness grows, the wrong knowledge diminishes in strength until it finally disappears. And the woman goes on, "The other day you were saying that there is no awareness in deep sleep, but I have on rare occasions become aware of sleep, even in that state." The Maharshi says, "Now, of these three factors, the awareness, sleep, and the knowledge of it, the first one, awareness, is changeless. That awareness, which cognized sleep as a state, now sees the world also in the waking state. The negation of the world is the state of sleep. The world may appear or disappear. That is to say, one may be awake or asleep. The awareness itself is unaffected. It is one continuous whole over which the three states of waking, dream, and sleep pass. Be that awareness even now. That is the self. That is realization. There is peace. There is happiness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So I chose this reading today because it contains many of the things that you all have heard me say over and over, but in the words of the Master. This is his direct instruction to you. And sometimes I use different words. I use things like the veiling of the mind. But you can hear in his description where the words I use come from. Not from his words, but from my direct experience, attempting, as you're doing, to follow his teaching, to look where he's pointing, not at the words themselves, but at the experiences that are behind them. This is always our task, isn't it? We use the mind to explore, to learn. That's the root of our seeking, is in the mind. But always as we're listening to the words, it's incumbent on us to begin to ask, how can I penetrate these words? What is the real meaning of this experientially? Because as we all know, words are never enough. When we're learning something, we can read about it, but until we go and actually do the task that we're reading about, try to learn that instrument, learn a new way of doing yoga, a new posture, a new movement in Qigong, whatever it is that we're trying to learn. First we hear about it, we read about it, someone tells us about it. But then if we really want to make it our own, we have to take those words, and we have to go and we have to consider them for some period of time. And that really is what our cushion is for. Our cushion is a place where we can look directly at the teachings of the Masters, and we can say, how does this apply to me? What is my experience here? These are the Master's words. This is the direction. But how do I apply it? And so this is what we're required to do if we enter into the inquiry as well. It's just like beginning to explore anything else. It's a trial and error situation. And the reason I say that is because I'm still hearing reports from people, both here and further abroad, that they're having some difficulty with the recognition of the importance or the usefulness, and this may not be you, of the inquiry itself. Am I aware? What is aware? Who am I? Usually when I hear this kind of comment, it's coming from the place where the inquiry itself has stopped in the mind. So there's a mental recognition, there's a conceptual understanding of what needs to happen. But what hasn't happened is this penetrative awareness that goes deep into the source of the I thought. And in some ways, that's what this questioner here is asking Ramana, how do I do this? How can I do this at home? And so on. And he says, first understand that you are always the self. And why does he say this? First of all, he says it because it's true. It's his experience that you can never not be aware. Waking state, dreaming state, even in the deep sleep state where mind is not present, there is this recognition, I slept well, or I didn't sleep well. Or as she points out, sometimes even awareness can come into the sleep state from the dream state or the waking state, and one can recognize. This is called lucid dreaming. Some of you know about it. This is the recognition that the body is asleep and I am aware. This can happen for you. It doesn't happen to everyone. Not something for you to seek. If it's going to happen, it will happen spontaneously. It's another one of those distractive siddhis, we call them, or powers that can arise as a consequence of practice. There can be all sorts of phenomenon that arise of a psychic nature and that feel very powerful and so on. But if we're just searching for those, we'll just become lost in whatever that power is and however it manifests for us. What he's actually asking us to do, and some of you have recognized this, is to come right up to this recognition through the question, who am I? What is aware? Am I aware? Through this kind of inquiry, come right up to the position of recognizing, I am here. I am aware and I know I am aware. With the mind, we cannot go any further. So now, at this moment, we develop and cultivate patience in our recognition that the self is always realized. Even we don't know that experientially. We're just waiting. But we keep coming back over and over. Every time the mind wanders, a thought comes into the mind, sensations happens in the body, attention moves to sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, or thinking, emoting. Remember, emoting is part of thinking. Emoting is not separate from thinking. They kind of rotate around each other. There's a thought, an emotional response, a thought to the emotional response, an emotional response to the second thought. You've seen this, right? So when I say thinking, I mean that whole chain of sequence. Because often what people will say is, well, yeah, I understand the part about thinking, but I don't get the part about emotion. So just understand that they're tied together and they do that dance. One is not always with the other, but frequently thought leads to a reactive emotion of some sort, and that leads to further. So you've seen that. Before that happens, though, if you are present enough, if you have enough attention available to you, you can ask, what's aware of this? Or what is aware that I am aware? And then you just wait. Because from here you can't go further with the mind. This is the limit of the mind. So I want to encourage you that if you come to this place, and some of you have, and someone reported to me this week, that they came to this place and they were only able to stay there for a few minutes, not because they didn't understand where they were, but because they didn't see the value of it. They didn't see the point of it. Well, sometimes the point of it takes a bit of time to manifest as direct perception in the mind. And so I'm just encouraging you, as Sri Ramana does here in this place, in this reading, to just keep being there as that felt sense, I am, with the recognition, I am aware that I am aware, and let go of all of your thinking. Let go of your expectation. Let go of the demand that something show up. Because if you keep the demand that something show up, I promise you something will. But it won't be what you're looking for. It will be some story about something that's going on in your body, or something that's going on yesterday, or something that's going on with this person or that person. And you've had that experience, and you just get sucked off into it. So it becomes very important at this moment, now that you're all cultivating the ability, even if it only lasts for a few seconds, just to stay present in this waking awareness that you are aware, without the need for there to be anything to follow. And what this will do for you is give you the opportunity for there to be a sudden recognition of yourself as consciousness itself. And of course, at that moment, what goes is the yourself piece, right? Because at the moment that you realize, I am that which is aware, the you in that situation is gone. Consciousness reveals itself, awareness reveals itself in the waking state as silence. But it's a silence which is full, and it's a silence which can bring you happiness and does bring happiness. There's an immediate recognition that you are that which is aware, and that every single thing that you are observing as phenomenon in your awareness is ephemeral, it's impermanent, it's empty, it's just passing by. And then, of course, joy rises from that experience. Why? Because the conditioned state of mind is that when an object rises in awareness, there is a response to it. Response is the mild form. Reaction is the more intense form. There's an immediate reaction in the mind, storytelling, pursuing, wanting to know, wanting to understand. So this activity just gets lit up in the mind. Now there's no attention for I am aware that I am aware. Now I'm not aware that I'm aware. I am aware of this object, yes. This is true. So you are still aware. Awareness does not go because of a thought that's in your mind, a sensation in your body, a taste in your mouth. Awareness is what makes all those objects knowable to you. But what I'm talking about here is that awareness which is prior to, non-reactive to, and unconcerned with the objects themselves. And this is what Raman is talking about here. He's telling her, if you take an interest in the worldview, awareness itself is veiled. You cannot see it. So he's not telling her, don't take that view, don't look at the world. He's simply saying, if you take that view, awareness itself is veiled. You cannot see it in its pristine state, which is the foundation of who you are and of all that is. So, the assumption we're making, sitting here, is that you're all interested in that. And of course, a lot of us come to this kind of inquiry, trying to end our suffering, and we're not realizing that our suffering is relative to the objects that we're seeing. And that one of the things we can do for ourselves is practice over and over watching the objects rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. Whether the objects are in mind or whether they are sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. We're just watching. Pain, or what we're just watching. This is the reason why we develop what we call meditation. Remember, those of you who were here last week, there was in the reading the explanation that meditation is dependent upon an object. Meaning, there has to be a me that is aware of the object. So there's a me which is hearing, a me which is tasting, a me which is smelling, a me which is so on, thinking. What inquiry can do for us is it can cause us to be able to stand firmly while tasting, touching, smelling the world and thought and emotion are going on in their natural way, because those things are triggered by conditioning, so they do happen. They will continue to happen. But what we are able to do with the inquiry and the return to moment by moment awareness as awareness, not awareness of awareness, this is important, but awareness as awareness. As you sit here now, look directly at your experience in this moment. Are you aware of an object? Or are you aware as awareness? If you are aware as an object, what you will be doing is trying to catch hold of what I'm saying, trying to remember it, trying to log it in for later. If you are here as awareness, it makes no difference what I'm saying. But my speaking can be an anchor for the realization I am aware. Does this make sense to you? Can you experience this directly in this moment? If you have some difficulty with this, I want you to listen to my voice, hear the words, hear the sound. Don't pay so much attention to the words, but hear the sound. And I want you to notice immediately when the sound ceases. If we're attending to an object, we can use that object to become fully aware that awareness is I am that awareness by attending to the end of an object which is present. Does not make any difference whether that object is sound, taste, touch, smell, sensation in the body, or thinking. As soon as there is a recognition that an object which the attention has gone to, such as sound, as soon as that object drops, there is a space which occurs. And what's happening is the mind is waiting just for a moment for the next object, for the next sound. Whether it comes from up here, or it comes from outside, or it comes from the bathroom, doesn't matter. The mind is waiting. But if you catch that moment, now what happens is you have a direct perception of what it means to be aware as awareness. And it may be that another sound, like the cicadas, will enter into that awareness and attention will drift over to that one. But if you're just waiting, right, because you've already had the experience of just being aware and knowing I am aware. So if you just wait there, another sound may come and attention naturally, if it's strong enough, attention will naturally drift toward that other sound. But now you've anchored yourself in awareness itself, as awareness, right? So you've let go of the object of the voice, and the object of the cicadas has risen. But you're still just waiting. Did you catch it? If you catch the end of objects before the mind starts a conversation or a description or an argument about the experience, now you are resting as awareness. And this may only happen for a moment, but over time, doing this over and over, now the sounds rise and fall in your own being as awareness itself. Can you see this? This brings us back to the analogy from last week or the week before, where we talked about being the screen on which everything appears. As long as we keep attending to the objects, we keep being aware of. But as soon as we begin to understand, I am that which is aware, and attending to the screen itself, now the objects can come and go. In this environment, this can be a very pleasant experience. The sound comes and goes, it shifts to a different sound, and at each point comes back to this original sound, goes back to the other sound, goes back to the dog barking up on the corner. The sounds come and go, but in between, we're having the direct experience of what it is to be awareness itself. That which is aware of objects without reactivity. Over time, this gives us a firmer and firmer understanding that the root of all that is awareness. Awareness itself. And it manifests as awareness of objects. So we have consciousness, which in the waking state we recognize as awareness, which in the body-mind we recognize as mind, thinking, tasting, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. And then we recognize as the world itself. So from the beginning, we can begin to see that consciousness itself has moved out of itself and is now the world. And we can see it at every step of the procession. Now, for some of you, this is going to sound like I'm describing a very intense mental exercise. And you're going to be going, the mind is going to be going, but I just want to love. I just want to experience bliss. Right? Do you know this voice in the mind? It does this from time to time. Oh, this is too hard. I just don't, I want to obliterate the mind and just experience bliss. But you know, the mind is an extension of consciousness itself. Without consciousness and awareness and the I am sense, there is no recognition of mind. So we have to get to this point where we understand that the experiences, the objects that we experience as awareness are not our enemy. Right? Some of you have heard me talk about this. They are our near enemy, meaning they are our ally. And this is how we begin to understand how we can use everything in our experience, which we talked about last week. But for me, it's important to keep reinforming you of the need to recognize that everything is the self. And to keep explaining to you, reminding you week after week, how do I use everything? How do I move beyond this feeling that I have that I am separate from God, from awareness, from life, from the world? How do I move beyond this? Because without being willing to explore this in this way, we just keep pursuing the ideas in the head around, I just want to be bliss, I just want to be happiness, I just want to be love. And we just keep trying to push that river, not realizing that those characteristics are actually in our own heart. And it's the recognition or awareness of those characteristics which is calling to us. But there is no way to get it out there. It can only be gotten here. And this is how we do it. So now we snapped right back into awareness, as awareness. When I stop talking. Are you there as awareness now? Knowing you are aware? You're always there as awareness, right? This is what Bhagavan's pointing out here. You're always always there as awareness, but if you stop before the recognition, I am aware, in this moment, here now, if you stop along the way somewhere in some story or some experience, the veiling of the mind covers over this recognition. And it requires a certain amount of effort, but it isn't any further away than the reminder or the recollection for you. I am aware, and I know I am aware. And the willingness to let everything else dance. Right? The willingness to not be afraid of where the dance might go. One of the things someone said to me this week was that she was afraid that if she did this, that this was just going to mean that she was just triggering herself all the time. But this is a classic kind of response of the mind. This fear of not being able to cope with what arises. So this recognition that you are that which is aware at any time that you bring it to mind is the antidote to that fear. You can be thinking, I might not be able to handle what comes up. But if you look back, if that is the way that your mind tends to structure things for you, if you look back over your life, you'll see that there were lots of moments when you thought you couldn't handle this, and yet here you are. So that indicates it's time to give up that particular storyline and come to the recognition that if you rest as awareness, that this fear will also melt away through its own impermanence, not through your effort, just through the simple truth of what isness. Nothing stays in the mind forever, except awareness itself, because awareness itself is the foundation for the mind. And it's transcendent to the mind. It's transcendent to body-mind. It's transcendent to world. Remain as you are. Notice the ending. Of phenomena. Notice that mind is affected by the beginning and the end of phenomena. Awareness, that which is aware of mind, of phenomenon in mind, beginning and end, is unmoved by it. There's no impact. It's this recognition that brings us to the moment that we're able to just be with what is. And by coming to to this continuous recognition, I'm that which is aware of what is. We're able to strengthen our recognition that we are awareness itself. When this recognition becomes sufficiently strong, then the direct experience we have, not the thought, not the concept, but the direct perception, is I am that love. I am that compassion. Which I have been seeking outside of myself. When this recognition comes, the love, compassion, and recognition of yourself as aware, awake, naturally flows to the world. This love, this compassion, is what the world needs, much more than it needs you as the doer, the savior. The pure recognition of yourself as being, consciousness, and bliss is what the world is longing for. And this way that I just laid out to you over the last few minutes is the way to become be able to recognize this in yourself. Using everything that you have in your experience, but in some ways also knowing that what you experience, you are free of. You can act joyfully, you can dance in the dance of life, but you are free of it. Now, even when you're going downtown and you're grumpy as all get out and you're walking down the sidewalk and you realize that, oh, this is not my nature, this is just a thought, this is just a reaction to something happened a few minutes ago. Suddenly, in that moment, love, compassion, understanding, peace, and recognition of the Supreme is walking down the street. This is not you. It was you when you were grumbling about an experience you had a few minutes ago. As soon as you catch that, as soon as you come back to the recognition, that is unimportant. I am that which is aware. I am fully here as awareness itself in this moment. Now the street is lit up with your being. And of course it's not your being. You can't claim it. If you do, you'll end up grumpy again later. So, would you have anything you'd like to share? Or anything you'd like to ask about? Or any further explanation?
He's not saying I am claiming it. You know, when you said you can't claim it, but isn't saying I am, is that claiming it?
It is claiming it. But if the mind is being used, it's claiming it with the mind. So what inquiry is about coming to the recognition I am as the felt perception I exist. And then waiting silently in order to begin to get some sense of what is the nature of what is, beyond even the fundamental recognition I am. Is that clear? So what I'm pointing to here, remember that all I'm ever doing is pointing. So wherever you are in the process for yourself, if I'm saying to you, yes, I'm also saying, but look beyond that. What's beyond that? So yes, by all means. Before you arrived in the room, I explained how consciousness moves from consciousness as indeterminate, into awareness itself in the waking state, and then moves into something about the body-mind or about the thoughts, and then becomes the world, so that one can see with enough attention that everything that is the world, it has its origin in consciousness through awareness itself in the waking state and moves out into the world. So everything is consciousness. There is no doubt. Good, bad, or indifferent by human standards. Everything is consciousness. What the inquiry is about, and you hit the nail right on the head, it's about bringing that attention which flows habitually out into the world and then gets scattered, bringing it back through that actual chain of recognition to the moment of I am, and then waiting there. Not looking back out into the world saying, well, this is the end of it, I am, so now I'm just going to turn back to the world, I got it. But rather to say, what if I drop I am? Is it possible to be here just as that which is aware? Without even the arising of the felt body or mind state, I. Is that possible? Sure. Everyone knows this intuitively. Not everyone knows it experientially. Very good. Very good. And in some ways we can say that the most we can do using the body-mind is to come to this position of I, or I am. To come to this fundamental starting point, because it is out of I, or I am, that the whole of our experience, body, mind, and world, manifests. We can see this from that position. But the question naturally arises if we stand there long enough in that place of self-recognition, I am that which is aware, is the direct perception of awareness itself, free of the hindering factor or the veiling quality of mind, which even says I, just falls away naturally. There's not anything to do at that point. That's why it's always recommended that we come to I, or I am, and we wait quietly, as much as we're able to. And of course what we're talking about here all the time is how easily, through conditioning, through habit, if we come to that place of silent witnessing of I, the mind just gets really bored, gets upset, gets threatened as a death of the ego kind of experience approaches, and then it just wants to turn right back into whatever the objects are in experience. It wants to do the next thing to make it forget that it's not real. If you stand long enough in the question, who am I, or at the point of recognition, I am, what comes up is the ego's fear of death. Of course, this is a false fear, but nonetheless, through experience, throughout lifetimes, we come to believe I am the body, I am the mind, I am the experiences themselves. And this is what we call ego, is this belief that we are this experience that we're having. What the sages ask us to do is to look more carefully, more fully, to see what is at the root even of the recognition I, or I am.
Does it have to be scary to lose one's identity?
It does not have to be. No. But there are very few people in experience who have not built up a certain habitual way of thinking of oneself throughout a lifetime or lifetimes, right? And so typically, as we begin to dismantle that conditioning, that habitual way of viewing what it means to be who I am, or what it means to be human, or what it means to be whatever, however you describe yourself, the most common reaction that comes up is fear. So it's incumbent upon me to say that and to help to give people ways in which to look beyond the fear. Because remember, what we're always doing is looking through whatever's arising, right? The tendency in habitual thinking is to always look at what's arising. But what I'm encouraging here is that you look through what's arising. This begins to cultivate this transcendental recognition that you are that which is aware, free, unborn, undying. And you know, some of us just come into this world with a whole lot less conditioning and a whole lot less tendency to build up conditioning. This is usually the indication that this particular being, this consciousness, this manifestation, has been working at this for some time. When there's not a lot of conditioning that's built up over the course of a lifetime, or the conditioning is easily undermined. But it's not so easy for many, many people. The conditioning is the strongest experience they have. And so when the ego feels that conditioning is going to be completely undercut, it feels the full impact of that fear. And this is often what stops people from looking further. It's always important to remember that what's being talked about here, in terms of conceptual explanations and so on, is not what's being pointed at. And nonetheless, it's helpful to point out the way in which the mind likes to step to the side and then dance back over here and then move over there and then step back into the past and then project into the future. All of it is a tactic and a habit of avoiding what's here now.
advice for how to discern what's too much for someone to hear. And having several experiences where I'm saying too much and triggering and yet one person in particular keeps coming at me for answers. And I know the best thing to do would be to say nothing. But I don't. I say too much.
Who says too much?
Oh, maybe it's not. I don't know. But the conditioning, the defense mechanism.
In you?
No,
or
in
in
the
the
other
other
person.
Yeah. Well, but your question was, how do I discern that?
Yeah.
You're in the process of discerning that. Over time, you just begin to learn to read something more deeply into what's happening underneath the conversation you're having with someone. And you know when it's time to stop, when they've heard all they can hear at that moment. This is just how experience works, This is how we can use our own experience. We don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we're repressing or suppressing, but we do want to learn from our experience. That's not for our sake, right?
Right.
If we're going to actually help or work or be of some compassionate loving kindness towards someone, we need to be able to read what's happening in the dynamic of the relationship.
Do people ever request to be pushed? Because that's what I'm wondering in this particular situation is this person was not willing to hear anything 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And now they're at me.
Yeah.
And, okay, I said too much, defense mechanisms go up. But I'm wondering, okay, well maybe she was ready for it, or was requesting it somehow, on some level.
And then you're overthinking it. You have to just be spontaneous in your own experience. The limit you experienced this time was not the limit you experienced 12 years ago.
Right.
So you go with that.
Okay.
Go with that. Now you know what the new limit is. The thing I'm trying to point toward is that there isn't an energetic feel to every kind of relationship we have, whether it's a friend or a partner or whatever. There's an energetic feel to it. It's not about the body-minds, right? It's about the dance of awareness or consciousness in that situation. So start to tune into that, and you'll know ahead of time when to stop before that explosion happens. But if that explosion happens, you'll also know, okay, this is what is. Nothing to do. Just leave it.
What do you mean by energetic feel?
So, what I mean by energetic field is that I work with a lot of people, all of you sitting around this room. With every one of you, it's slightly different. And I'm aware of the energetic field of our particular coming together. And I'm aware that it is not the same for everyone. That every single one of you I have a very similar but very different relationship with. And each of you has to be treated according to what can be perceived about where you are in your understanding, what you're ready for, what might push you over a hump, and what might push you too far. This is something that comes into awareness as you mature in your self-knowledge. Because becoming aware of yourself in terms of self-knowledge is to become aware of everyone. So you just learn. There are certain signs, I can't really say beyond that, it's just an intuition. With this person I can go here, with this person I cannot. With this person I can go here, but with this one I have to go here. Ask yourself, is my intention to teach this person something, to have them understand something, have them get something, to have them awaken? Or is my intention to bring them toward love? To bring them out of the belief that they are limited, bound, trapped in some way. If that's your intention, rather than, I want you to get this, you have to understand this, then you will know where to stop and wait, right? Our practice is always about knowing, in some ways, when to stop and wait. Well, understand that if I'm committed to you, I'm going to wait at a certain point. And it may not come in that moment, or even if we talk for another hour, I may have to pass that point by. But a week later when you walk in, there might be an opening for that point. And if what I want is for you to experience yourself as greater than you think you are, as being consciousness and bliss, I'm willing to wait a long time. I have nothing to gain and nothing to lose. Is this your attitude?
Look, I don't know.
Do that. Yeah. And I will say this, you can just expect, and I'm not saying this in terms of you using your mind to project this, I'm saying this out of direct experience. You can just expect that as you slow down, calm down, come to know yourself as you are, you will find yourself not interjecting at certain points in your relationships. And over time, this can lead to triggering the people around you. Your task is still to know that even in this I am that which is aware. I'm not the personality. I don't need to defend anything. I don't need to convince anybody of anything. I don't need to get anything. I don't need to give anything. You see, being doesn't have that kind of requirement. It just is. So, sometimes, you just have to be willing to sit on the lower slopes of a volcano which you ignited. And that has to be okay with you. Because you don't know what the reason is, right? You don't know what happens as a result of that volcano going off. You just don't know. Same way with bliss. Someone can come in and just have a moment and bliss baby, right? You don't know why that happened. Who knows? Thank goodness it happened that way rather than the other way. Maybe it'll come up in mind. But our task in many ways is just to keep becoming able to remain here as awareness, aware that I am aware, and allow all of you to be as you are. One moment a volcano, next moment a rainbow. And of course we enjoy the rainbow moments more than the volcano moments, so that's where our difficulty, if we're talking to someone and we're trying to convey this kind of information to them, is that we want, we like rainbows, all of us, every time. We're going to choose rainbow. But part of what we do here is become comfortable with change, right? For each and every one of us, in each other, we want to become comfortable with change. And then once we become comfortable with change, we want to embrace change. And so we embrace change, whether it results in rainbow or it results in volcano. It's not personal. It's rainbow and volcano, but it's not personal. nothing about what we're doing here is personal. And some of you have heard me say that over and over, and you're starting to understand what I mean by that. If there's a sense that something is personal, I succeeded, I failed, whatever that sense of it's personal is, you have more work to do. You still want something. You're still demanding something from the other. You're wanting them to be a rainbow instead of a volcano. So, this weekend in India and in Tiruvannamalai and Ramana Ashram in particular is the last weekend of the festival of Navaratri. Are you familiar? I know you are because we've been there together, but some of you know that term, Navaratri. Navaratri means Festival of the Mother, and it's a 9-day festival in celebration of the Divine Mother or the Divine Feminine. And I'll pass this around. This has been offered to the Mother this week. And so this is the Mother's prasad. And what's happening now is today's the last day, or maybe it's tomorrow, that they actually put the Mother, the statue of the Mother Deity back into her temple. But what's happening in Ramana Ashram is that every night there is a celebration of a different aspect of the Divine Feminine. So one night is the celebration of Durga. One night is the celebration of Kali. One night is the celebration of Saraswati.
What is Durga, Kali, Saraswati?
Those are...
And what are the traits? I know, the traits of femininity. Where in English, what are those femininity, those traits?
Well, I would ask you, so I don't have to try to remember all of that, because there are 9 of them.
Okay.
So, yeah, go online.
It's online.
Yeah, go online, and you can, and you can, you can first...
Get good pictures.
Yeah, you can first look at the ramanaashram.org website, and you can find out which goddess is being celebrated on each of the 9 nights. And there'll be a description of that goddess, or if not there, you can go on to somewhere else, but you can get it.
In English, okay.
Yeah, in English. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. And there's so what's happening is every night there's a goddess figure which is taken out of the Mother Temple, out of the shrine itself, and brought out. And for 9 days, every day, that there's a new goddess which is represented by her form. And so there's a different sari, a different grouping of flowers, different kinds of jewelry, and different kinds of implements that are used in worship to that particular goddess. And so every night is a different night. And everyone waits in great anticipation as the priests do all their ceremonies and stuff behind a curtain. And then when the curtain is open, there's several hundred people out in front of that particular goddess deity, and then they chant and sing bhajans to that particular deity. One of the fun things that happens is that at some point, and I don't remember exactly how many days into the festival this is, whether it's at the beginning or the end, but there is a point at which, and this is all happening in what's called the Mother Shrine. So this is a temple devoted, this is where the samadhi, or the resting place of Ramana Maharshi's mother is, who was a realized being at the time of her death. And so with realized beings, the bodies are not burned, as with the rest of people in India. The bodies are actually put into a sacred tomb, and then a small temple is built around it. So in her temple, the Mother Shrine, the deity's brought out, and some number of girls, I don't know if you know if there's an exact number, I think it's just however many prepubescent girls are available around the area at that time. So it's like 3 or 4 or 6, right? And they dress these young girls up. They're usually about 9, 8, 9, 7, 10, and they dress them up in these beautiful saris. And then the women come and they sit in front of the mother shrine. And the women come into the front door of the temple and they offer gifts and prayers, and they prostrate to this row of young girls sitting to honor the divine feminine. And then the girls take a handful of rose petals out of a basket, and as each woman rises, they offer the rose petals back to the older women. It's very beautiful. It's not something that you can really get into if you're a man, because it's happening inside the woman's temple, but sometimes they allow a man to stay in there if you're already sitting in there meditating and this ceremony starts. If you're already there for some reason, they don't shush you out or anything. But what they do is there is a point at which they close the doors and all the men have to go out. And I've only seen this on video because a friend of mine took some videos while she was there doing this. And then all the women dance ecstatically for a long time all around the outside of the mother shrine. But inside the outside walls, right? So you have the shrine, the Holy of Holies, and then you have an outer walls and the door over here. Well, all these doors are closed and the women circle around the shrine and they all dance together, and it's just amazing and it's blissful. So that's happening now, or some form of that is happening now. So
Should I Google the Festival of Mother, or what would you?
Navaratri. Navaratri. And it's just like it sounds. Navaratri.